It began with a phone call that no one at the FBI field office expected to matter. The voice on the other end was calm, too calm. He didn't sound frightened. He didn't sound emotional. He sounded helpful. "I think I know something about the recent murders," the man said. At the time, the city was living in fear. 3 women had been found over the course of 8 months, different neighborhoods, different backgrounds, but the method was the same: abduction, restraint, and a chilling level of control. There were no witnesses, no usable fingerprints, no clear suspect. The media had already given him a name: the River County Strangler. The FBI had joined the investigation after local police ran out of leads. Behavioral analysts were called in. They built a profile: organized, intelligent, socially functional, likely someone who could move unnoticed in everyday life. Someone ordinary. So when the caller said he had information, agents listened. The man introduced himself as Daniel Harper. He claimed he had noticed suspicious activity near one of the crime scenes: a vehicle parked for long periods, someone watching, someone who didn't belong. He spoke clearly, methodically. He described details most callers wouldn't think to mention: lighting conditions, timing, traffic patterns. The agent taking the call wrote everything down. It seemed like a solid tip. Harper called again the next week, and then again. Each time he brought something new: possible locations, behavioral observations, theories about how the killer might be selecting victims. At first, agents were cautious. Tipsters came and went all the time. Most were unreliable. But Harper was different. His information was specific, and sometimes it was accurate. During one call, he suggested the killer might be familiar with abandoned service roads near the river. He even named one. 2 days later, investigators searched that area. They found evidence: not a body but fibers, tire impressions, signs that a vehicle had been there recently. Harper's credibility grew. Soon he wasn't just another tipster. He became a regular contact. Agents began returning his calls. Behavioral analysts even started asking his opinion. Harper spoke with the confidence of someone who understood criminal psychology. He discussed control, escalation, risk tolerance. He sounded like a man studying the killer. What no one realized was that the killer was studying them. Daniel Harper was polite, cooperative, and patient. He never asked for recognition, never tried to insert himself into the investigation publicly. He just kept helping, and the investigation began to shift. Using Harper's suggestions, the FBI refined their profile. The offender likely had mechanical knowledge, likely used restraints he brought himself, likely stored tools somewhere private. Harper even suggested the killer might follow media coverage closely, adjusting his behavior based on law enforcement activity. The analysts agreed. That made sense. But what they didn't ask was a simple question: how did Harper know so much? The 4th victim was discovered early on a cold morning near the riverbank. The news spread quickly. Before the FBI even held their internal briefing, Daniel Harper called. "I think he's accelerating," Harper said quietly. "Something has changed. He's becoming more confident." The agent on the line asked how he could be so sure. There was a brief pause. "Because the disposal location shows less caution," Harper replied. "He's taking more risks." The assessment matched what agents were seeing at the scene. Again, Harper was right. That was the moment he stopped being just a helpful citizen. He became a resource. Over the next 2 months, the FBI spoke with Harper dozens of times. He never refused to call. He answered questions thoughtfully. He even predicted that the killer might begin contacting authorities or media to feel a sense of power. Agents began to believe Harper might have a background in psychology or criminology. When they asked, he simply said he read a lot. Meanwhile, the murders stopped. Weeks passed, then months. No new victims. The task force cautiously wondered if the offender had moved or stopped. Then something unexpected happened. Harper stopped calling. At first, no one noticed. The investigation had slowed. Leads were thin. Attention shifted to reviewing old evidence. But one analyst did notice. Harper had been deeply engaged, almost invested. Then suddenly, silence. The analyst suggested reaching out. An agent called the number Harper had provided. No answer. They tried again the next day. Still nothing. It might have ended there, just another tipster who lost interest. But then a patrol officer made a routine discovery that changed everything. A vehicle had been abandoned near a wooded area outside the city. It had been there for several days. No plates. Inside the trunk, officers found restraints, plastic sheeting, and something else. A printed map of the county. Several locations were circled, including every known body recovery site. The vehicle was registered under a different name, but investigators quickly discovered the registration was fraudulent. However, one thing inside the car wasn't. A receipt from a hardware store, purchased with a credit card. The name on the card was Daniel Harper. The FBI moved quickly. They pulled Harper's records. At first glance, he appeared unremarkable. Mid-30s, employed, no criminal history, no violent complaints, quiet, stable. The kind of person neighbors describe as nice and kept to himself. But when analysts looked closer, patterns began to emerge. Harper's home address placed him within driving distance of every crime scene. Cell tower data showed his phone had been active near 2 victim disappearance locations. And then there was something even more disturbing. The timeline. Harper's calls to the FBI often came shortly after new evidence was released internally. He wasn't just helping, he was monitoring. Agents obtained a search warrant. What they found inside Harper's home confirmed their worst fear. Detailed notes, newspaper clippings, police activity timelines, maps, and a notebook. Inside it were observations written in calm, precise handwriting, descriptions of surveillance, victim routines, environmental conditions, emotional reactions, not the reactions of an investigator, the reactions of someone reliving the events. Daniel Harper wasn't helping the FBI find the killer. He was helping them understand him, because he was the killer. But the most chilling discovery came at the end of the notebook, a section titled Communication Strategy. In it, Harper described his calls to the FBI, why he made them, what he hoped to learn, how investigators responded to different types of information. He wasn't just giving tips, he was running experiments. Every conversation helped to measure their thinking. Every question they asked revealed their priorities. Every reaction told him how close they were. For months, Daniel Harper had been speaking directly to the people hunting him, and he had been learning from them. When agents arrested him, Harper didn't resist. He didn't deny anything. In fact, he seemed relieved. During interrogation, he admitted something that stunned investigators. "I wanted to see how good you were," he said calmly. "I wanted to know if you could understand me." He described the calls as a game, a way to stay connected, a way to feel in control. But the most disturbing part of his confession wasn't the murders. It was his explanation for helping. "I didn't want the wrong person arrested," he told them. Agents later realized the truth behind that statement. If someone else had been arrested, his game would have ended. Harper had been protecting himself and protecting the investigation, because the investigation was his connection to the thrill. The case later became a study within the FBI's behavioral analysis unit. It revealed something deeply unsettling about certain offenders. Some don't just hide. Some want to be close, close to the investigation, close to the people hunting them, close to the fear they create. Daniel Harper wasn't just committing crimes. He was participating in the story, and for months, the FBI had been taking his calls. After Daniel Harper's arrest, investigators believed the hardest part was over. They were wrong, because now they had to understand him. Inside the interrogation room, Harper sat calmly, almost comfortably. There was no panic, no visible guilt. He answered questions politely, sometimes even correcting investigators when their timelines were slightly off. It wasn't arrogance, it was ownership. To him, the investigation had never been separate from the crimes. It was part of them. Behavioral specialists soon realized something disturbing. Harper hadn't just been calling the FBI to mislead them. He was feeding them controlled truth. Enough accurate information to build trust, but never enough to expose himself. Every call had a purpose. When agents asked how he chose victims, Harper didn't talk about anger or revenge. Instead, he spoke about patterns, opportunity, and risk management. His language sounded more like a project manager than a murderer. Control was everything to him, but the real shock came when analysts reviewed the timeline of his calls. Harper usually contacted the FBI shortly after each crime, not to confess, not to brag, but to relive the experience. Hearing agents discuss the case gave him the same psychological reward as the crime itself. The investigation had become his second addiction, and when the murder stopped for several months, there was a reason. Harper later admitted he paused intentionally. "I wanted to see if you noticed the change," he said. He was testing the system. During that pause, he increased his contact with the FBI. He offered deeper insights, stronger analysis, even predicting possible future behavior, his own behavior. Agents unknowingly used some of his suggestions to adjust their strategy. In a way, Harper had helped design the hunt for himself. But there was a darker layer. When forensic teams searched his computer, they found detailed records of every conversation he had with investigators. He noted tone, response time, level of interest, and emotional reactions. He wasn't just talking to the FBI, he was studying them like subjects. Psychologists later described his mindset as interaction-driven control. The crimes gave him power, but the communication gave him validation. Being heard, being trusted, being taken seriously by federal agents fed his sense of superiority. That's why he never wanted the case solved too quickly. And that's also why the abandoned vehicle was no accident. During questioning, Harper revealed he had been feeling the pressure of time. Media attention was fading. The investigation was slowing. The connection he felt with the case was weakening. So he escalated the risk. Leaving the vehicle was a calculated move. He wanted investigators to find it. He wanted the case to feel alive again. But he believed the evidence was clean enough to avoid direct identification. He was wrong. One small financial trace led to his name. When agents told him this, Harper simply nodded. "I miscalculated," he said. There was no fear in his voice, only disappointment. But the most chilling moment came near the end of his interrogation. An agent asked him a simple question. "Why keep helping us?" Harper thought for a few seconds. Then he replied quietly, "Because I wanted to be part of something important." For him, the crimes alone weren't enough. He didn't just want to commit them. He wanted to sit inside the investigation, inside the fear, inside the system that existed because of him. And for months, he had succeeded. The trial of Daniel Harper drew national attention, but inside the courtroom, there was no drama, no emotional outbursts, no sign of the monster people expected to see. He sat quietly, neatly dressed, taking notes, watching, just like he always had. Prosecutors presented months of evidence maps, surveillance notes, forensic links, financial records, and the chilling logs of his conversations with the FBI. Each piece revealed the same disturbing truth. Harper hadn't just committed the crimes. He had built a system around them, a system of control, a system of observation, a system where he wasn't just the offender, he was also the analyst. For the families of the victims, the most painful testimony wasn't about the crimes themselves, it was about the phone calls. Hearing that the man who caused their loss had calmly spoken with investigators, offering advice, shaping the investigation, and even influencing strategy, it felt like a second violation. He hadn't just taken lives, he had manipulated the entire search for justice. Behavioral experts testified that Harper fit a rare but dangerous profile. Offenders who seek psychological proximity to the investigation. They don't hide completely. They orbit the case, feeding off attention, influence, and the sense of being intellectually superior. For them, the investigation becomes part of the fantasy. And Harper had taken that idea further than most. During sentencing, the judge asked if he had anything to say. Harper stood. The courtroom was silent. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. Instead, he said something that stayed with everyone who heard it. "I always wondered how close you were," he said calmly. "Now I know." He was sentenced to multiple life terms without the possibility of parole. The case was officially closed. But inside the FBI, it didn't end there. The investigation became a training study for behavioral units across the country. Agents were taught to recognize a difficult truth sometimes. The most helpful voice in an investigation can belong to the offender. Tipsters are now evaluated not just for what they know, but how they know it. Patterns of repeated contact, unusually detailed analysis, emotional detachment, or a strong need for involvement are treated with caution. Because of Daniel Harper, investigators learned something unsettling. Some killers don't run from the investigation. Some walk straight into it. Years later, when agents reviewed the case files, one detail stood out. During the entire investigation, Harper never once asked if they were getting closer to a suspect. He didn't need to. He was already listening to every step, already measuring every move, already sitting inside the system built to stop him. And in his mind, that was the real victory, until the moment one small mistake broke the illusion of control. Because in the end, the game he created had one rule he couldn't escape. The more you stay close to the hunt, the closer the hunt comes to you.